Hi everyone, welcome to my personal finances podcast, episode 55. First, I would like to start off by asking, how do you feel when you have to make a presentation? Enjoy or not, presenting in some form is usually a part of business. Whether you get up in front of a formal audience or on a regular basis, or you simply have to make your voice heard in a meeting or in a discussion itself, you're actually using presentation skills. So, we are here today to find out how you can present the best version of ourselves and how can you increase your income by being a great presenter. Hi, Non.
Hello, hi Catherine.
Welcome to the show. Thanks for being on the show today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
It's great to have you here. So, maybe we can start off with having you. Maybe some of us do already recognize you, do already see the post, but it would be great if you have the honor to actually have you introduce yourself briefly.
Sure. So, hi everyone. My name's Non. I go by Non. I think if anyone does know who I am, it's probably because of that. I've been in broadcasting for a really long time. I was on air with Mix FM and then Light FM and then Capital FM. I've read the news on NTV7. Um, I MC a whole bunch of
And the list goes
events,
on,
and the
right?
list goes on. Yeah, so primarily that's what I do. Yeah.
Hmm. Yep.
Mhm.
So, other than that, would you like to share with us also some of the things that you're doing right now?
Sure. So currently, I'm actually in the process of developing a couple of YouTube channels. That's basically just for fun because I just want to keep my toe in the water of broadcasting, so to speak. And the way broadcasting works, or at least what I've seen worldwide, is that there's a natural progression from traditional media into things like YouTube, and there are loads of opportunities there. And because I sort of have the experience doing stuff like that, it's one of those rare opportunities that pops up where you have a forum to do pretty much whatever you want, which is a wonderful opportunity. Of course, the flip side of that is that the challenges are, multiplied by a factor of 1,000 because you are everything. You're the writer, the producer, the director, the camera person, the lighting person, sound. Everything is there, but as I say, I've had some experience doing that before. It's different because now the ownership becomes mine. So that
Mm.
comes with its own little challenges. On top of that, I do fill up a fair bit of my time trying to help people with improving their presentation skills. It's a new thing for me, but in I suppose in a sense, the way that I do it slightly differently from most other people is that I've actually created a module, but the module itself being modular, I can sort of customize it depending on your particular needs. So I don't typically do big groups of people, although I can. I just prefer not to because I think, you know, uh, it's like a classroom situation. Everybody has different levels,
Mm.
and you want to be as effective as you can and offer as much value as you can to each person. But if you've got somebody who's sort of there on the experience level, and you've got somebody who's up here, how do you find a way to tailor that your messaging and your training for everyone and all those in between as well? So I much prefer to do things one on one. And on top of that, I do help with the actual creation of presentations for people. So rather than somebody has a presentation and then they want help doing the public speaking bit, suddenly I can help with that. But I also will look at a presentation, and it doesn't really matter what the subject matter is, provided it's not astrophysics or something like that. I can sort of help you tailor it. And we'll talk a little bit about what it takes to have a good presentation.
All right. Thank you so much for the introduction, also about
Sure.
sharing about what you're doing right now. So, other than that, to for our audience to get to know you a bit better, more in a personal way, I have another five quick fire question.
Sure.
So, number one, so could you tell us what motivates you in life or work?
Oh, that's a very good question. It's also quite a tough one. Lots of different things actually. I'm actually really motivated by this idea of gratitude. Because if I look back on my life and I look at all the things that I've been able to do, it's because I was given the opportunity to do that. And beyond that, I've also realized that I've learned how to look at things from a slightly different perspective. Um, I know it's a very corny thing to say, very hokey. People go, you can change challenges into opportunities, and fundamentally that's actually true. But when you find a way to make that kind of your life, the world becomes this really exciting place. So I guess I'm driven by that. I'm driven by the excitement of what's happening tomorrow. What's happening tomorrow? I always wake up excited. Again, I know it sounds really hokey, but I get up excited. Yeah, just what's the next thing going to be? Yeah,
Wow, that's great. I mean, what's better than, waking up the every day and feel like, it's a new day and, and looking forward to what's coming, instead of, I know there are people, especially times like this, they wake up, the dread, the, the dread, the
sure,
feeling of waking up, to me, you
absolutely.
gotta live every day and you're gonna live in the moment.
Sure. Let me qualify. So in my case, it's like, okay, maybe 4 out of 7 days. That's how it is. Like, okay, the 3 days I just sort of, okay, maybe I don't want to get up. Yeah.
Or maybe, I mean, on normal cases it's just another day,
Yeah.
but I do think like we should try to work towards, having the thought of waking up and feel like, yeah, looking forward to what's coming.
Sure.
Very good one. Okay, so next, so yeah, my channel is my personal finances podcast,
Hmm.
gonna relate about no finances. So what
Hmm.
is your personal definition of financial independence?
So again, great question. Financial independence is really more about responsibility, I think, more than anything else. It's one of the things that you don't actually learn as such. If I had my way, I'd want that to be fiscal responsibility to be part of the school curriculum because it's something that you can learn very early on in life, and you should actually, um, because that's life. Life can be hard, and if you don't manage your finances well, you're definitely going to have problems. These are adult things, these are grown up things to worry about. But
Mm,
if you're a kid and you learn them early on, you understand the value of money, you understand how money can work for you, and what's the relationship between your effort and all those sorts of things that eventually as an adult, hopefully you learn. Um, I would much rather kids be given the opportunity to learn those sorts of things. So sorry, in a very roundabout sort of way, what I mean about personal finances is and being financially responsible. It's about knowing how to apportion your income and looking at where the priorities are. It's an old adage, and I'm sure you know this very well. The first person you should pay is yourself. You need to build a pool of savings, learn about investment. I certainly didn't when I was younger. I did learn about it later on. I'm very glad that I had a friend who introduced me to the idea. Um, and let your EPF work for you. If I had to pick
mm.
anything, I would pick that.
Interesting, interesting. Yeah, I mean, yeah, the best thing that you brought up is really about starting young,
Mm,
because like we all know that we did not get the opportunity when we were young. Like these were not taught in school,
hmm.
and like most of us like grew up learn from mistakes. And
Yeah,
some of the mistakes can be very, very painful. Some of the mistakes can be, it takes years or take forever to recover from.
yeah.
So yeah, and also like if kids were taught in the school very young age to start being like responsible with their finances, with their own like finances, this would help them so much in growing up.
Hmm.
Like, thank you for that. And so about yourself, like how do you save and invest?
Okay, so I'm not great at it, which is why I can talk about, I wish I had learned a lot of stuff earlier. Um, but again, this goes back to the whole thing about, um, challenges and like providing you with opportunities. I have learned uh, to try very hard to live within my means, right? And especially given my line of work,
Mhm.
where it's not a steady paycheck, right? Which doesn't actually make it uncomfortable. It just is a different way of doing things. So because I get payments for things on a very staggered basis, I do have to think very carefully about how to work things out. The good news is that monthly commitments are pretty much locked in stone. You have a pretty good idea of what they're going to be. But when your income is staggered, you do actually need to kind of stockpile, if that if that's a good way of describing it,
Yep.
and allowing that to build. I'm a big advocate for compound interest. It may not be the most aggressive or forward thinking investment strategy, but I've always been sort of very safe like that anyway,
Mm.
because I'm not in the stock market. I don't look at company portfolios and things like that because I simply don't have the pool of experience to want to commit to something like that. However, that being said, I did trust in unit trust, for example, with the EBF because it was already there. And I did have a long chat with a friend of mine who does investments, and they really, really took the time to explain it to me, and that was really important.
Mm.
I think a lot of people are concerned about investments and things like that because one, they don't really understand it, and two, they don't want to ask, which is a fatal flaw. And they go, but I should just trust the professionals. Yeah, you kind of do, but you do need to at least understand the very basics of it before you start, giving your money to other people to invest for you. Um, you know,
Exactly.
yeah, there's an old joke about about people who manage funds. I mean, if they were so amazing at it, why aren't they all fabulously rich as well? So take that with a pinch of salt. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, you brought up the point about, yes, I mean, I'm talking about agents, the product or investment itself can be brilliant, like can be the best, but it might not be the best for you. So really
Correct.
the best thing to do is really to understand, your own financial situation. I think like the point that you mentioned about how your income came in like in a staggered way, which
Hmm.
it can be so relevant to people nowadays because we see more and more people started doing like freelancing, that
Hmm.
their full time is basically freelancing. They will have the same problem.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, like I guess the best way is really to talk to the professional, and then at the same time asking question like so you can actually like fully understand how to deal with your own finances instead of just listening. I think
Quite right.
that's very, very important.
Yeah. Take an active role. Take an interactive role in
Yeah,
how your money is going to be invested. Yeah, for sure.
exactly, because it's your money and it's your life, and then it's the way you want to deal with your money.
Hmm.
Right. Right. Okay. So next question is, what's your favorite quote? Like a
Oh,
motto of life or one that you go by every day. Wake up and think of that.
well, okay, maybe not every day. At the risk of something really facetious, it's a Latin thing. It's called subspecie eternitatis, and please forgive me because I don't speak Latin, but that's how it's written.
No.
And translated, what it means is the having the perspective of eternity, and what that means is, well, if you can imagine yourself from an overhead view, okay,
Hmm.
so that's the perspective of eternity where you can see everything from start to finish. So if you can do that, then you would realize that every journey from A to B, for example, and if you're overhead looking at A to B, you notice that it's not always going to be a straight line. It's going to be, jagged, and there'll be things that are sort of in the way, but A gets to B,
Hmm.
right? Regardless. So what that means is don't place any judgments on the things that happen to you along that journey. And a judgment is whether you decide something is good or something is bad. It's not. It just is. When you understand that, then you realize that this is just kind of how it has to be. You don't really care about those things along the way. You just care about getting to be. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sounds very meaningful. Does that mean, I'm sorry if let me rephrase or like
Sure, sure, sure.
from my
Yeah.
own understanding. Does that mean, instead of like always stuck in the situation and doesn't matter what happens, it can be something sad or something happy or something that you're angry about. If you actually bring yourself to a overhead view, and it makes you feel like it's things happens, it just
Yeah,
happen.
it pretty much is. It's basically, if I can pick another analogy to describe that one, it's the difference between two people looking at rain. One person deciding, oh man, that means I'm going to be stuck in traffic, it's going to get me to get home late. And another person, possibly a farmer, I don't know, looking at it and going, wow, excellent rain. I'm going to have a good harvest. It's the same thing. The rain is the rain. It's just a question of your perspective and whether you decide it's an obstacle or it's an opportunity. That's it.
Mm.
Yeah.
Hmm. Okay. This is a different way from what I look at it, but
Okay. Yeah.
yeah, but definitely it's very helpful. Like so often we see people get stuck in a situation where they just can't see another way out. They feel like it's the end of
Oh,
the
yeah.
world. It's like there's nothing they can do. They're stuck with this problem. Everything that we talk about, like this person might brought things when I solve this problem, I will do this. Once this
Sure.
is solved, I will do this instead
Yeah.
of no, what can I do now?
Yeah.
Right.
That's a really, really good point. And if I could add to that, it's always the first small step. By all means, go through the process. Allow yourself to go through the trauma, so to speak. It's a difficult position. Don't try to fool yourself that it's not. It is. It is what it is. But once you've allowed yourself to ride through the emotion of it, then you need to sort of take stock and go, okay, what first thing can I do to move myself forward? Because if you're not, moving forward, you are stuck or moving backwards. It's as simple as that. And situations can be really, really difficult. I don't want to take that away from anyone. I've been there. And it's easy to sit there and allow yourself to be depressed, and but that doesn't help you. At the end of the day, what you want is to get out of it and move forward. And unfortunately, sometimes you're going to be on your own, and you really are the only person that can help yourself.
Yeah. That's that's really heartfelt. I'm pretty sure like
Mm.
some of the audience who are listening, they might feel that, in them. All right. So one last thing before we actually go to the real topic is
Hmm.
it's a mini game, like it's a randomly generated question, out of a
Okay.
20,000 yeah, question generator. So
Okay.
I'll just read out the question to you. It's you have to choose either one, and then you're gonna explain why this instead of the other. All right.
Okay.
Okay. All right. I'll just read out the question. So, okay. So your sports team mascot will be snake or pony.
Okay.
Yeah. Do you want me
Snake
to repeat
or
the question?
pony? No, I totally got it. I don't know why that's affected me
It's
so
random.
psychologically. I'm gonna go with pony, and I have to
Okay.
explain why, right?
Okay. Yes.
Um, Look, I like snakes. I think they're very cool. I think they have a very bad rap, but they're a little too aggressive as a mascot. I think I like the idea of a pony. They're kind of cute. So yeah, I just because they're cute. I'd rather be known as the ponies than the snakes. To be, yeah.
Huh. Okay, that's something new that we know about you. I
Okay.
personally might pick a snake just because
Oh
it's
yeah.
the Chinese zodiac. Yeah,
Ah, right. Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
But I
So
didn't
we
quite think
are.
of
Yeah.
yeah. I didn't quite think of the point where whether people will look at me as being fierce or being cute. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough.
Interesting. All right. Okay. Let's start off with why is presentation skills so important to our lives now?
You know what? My contention would be that they've always been important. It's something that hasn't really changed, but maybe what it is the definition of presentation skills, and why it's so important to present the best version of yourself. It has a lot to do with your personal perspective on life. There are people that I have met who will get themselves, you know, perfectly ready for a job interview. which is, you've heard the saying, dress for the job you want, and that's absolutely true. They present themselves very, very well at the interview, but then after all of that is done, they revert to a completely different state, whatever that state may be. I mean, if it's already a very forward, successful orientation, that's fine. But a lot of people just think, I just need to be great for the interview, and then that's it. The problem with that is that you are great for the interview, and you probably get the job. But then when you get into the job, which person are you then? Uh, and more often than not, people revert to that less successful version of themselves because, hey, I've already got the job. I don't really care. The question is whether or not you can follow through with that, and to the extent that it becomes who you are. So that's really important. So as far as presentation skills go, it's at every facet of your life. Who are you presenting yourself as to your news agent, to the person at the convenience store, to the Grab driver? You know, is the best version of yourself the best version of yourself all the time? That's the thing, all right? And so I'm just looking at my notes here. There is also now a generation of people who have grown up believing that presenting themselves has all to do with screen time, right? It's about social media.
You just
Um,
have an audience saying, agreeing to whatever you said earlier, which I totally agree. So sorry to interrupt, but
no, no, no,
that's
no, not at all. Good. I'm glad I'm sort of getting some points across and resonating. Um, People are constantly putting themselves out there, which is great, which is excellent, provided that is, I guess, your authentic self. My contention would therefore be, try to work on your authentic self. Look, don't get me wrong. Social media is one of those opportunities for people to generate a fair bit of income as well. And I understand that there is a presented version and then there is a personal version. I mean, after all, having been in radio and TV, I know that there is a line, between the person who I am on air and the person who I am in private, and completely different things. However, your general attitude should, for the most part, stay the same. You can't be a churchgoer, but then, present yourself on screen as somebody who's bashing religion, for example. It's not a great example, but you know what I mean, right? There has to be some consistency, I think. I hope that
yeah.
kind of answers the
That
question.
that
That's it.
that that gives you a totally different perspective. Actually, like I didn't really think of it that way.
Okay.
Yeah, people think of presentation skill like thinking, it's a skill that I pick up. It's a skill that if I go for enough courses or if I actually practice enough, and then I will, I'll be better. I will be a group presenter.
You know what? You certainly can. You're not wrong at all. It's one of those things, and you and I have discussed this privately, right? We talked about what are the misconceptions, right, about
Hmm.
about presentation skills. Certainly, one of the biggest misconceptions for me is that it is a talent, an innate talent that someone has, but you've touched on it already. You're right. It can be learned. There are lots of things that you can learn to improve your ability to present, but at the same time, those those things, it's what separates a good speaker from a great speaker, and it's your level of personalization is what you bring to it. People talk about the X factor. What is the X factor? Well, it's called the X factor because nobody really knows what it is. You know it when you see it. um, but I guess what I'm trying to say is, by all means, take the courses, invest in yourself, but understand that this idea of investing in yourself is more than just having a skill set. It's a really holistic thing. It really does boil down to your attitude towards things, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think one thing is the attitude, and like you mentioned, like authenticity. It's a very very important point. Like I noticed, like there are a lot of people on the social media who are totally not themselves on social
Mm-hmm.
media on and on real life. I think the
Mm-hmm.
same thing applies to when we try to present ourselves, whether it's we are in front of that person trying to communicate, or in front of a big audience trying to like bring out our points. I think being authentic is a very, very important thing.
Certainly, I'm quite sure that some of your viewers are going to be asking, well, yeah, but like, let's say it's a CEO doing a presentation. The CEO is not going to want to be, he's not going to try to be buddy with, he or she is not going to be buddy with everyone in the audience. There is a role that they have to play, but that doesn't take away from the fact that there is a certain level of authenticity that sort of needs to be there.
Mm.
I understand that once you are C-suite and above, for example, there is a certain there's a certain demeanor that you have to present. But at the same time, you look at how things have progressed. You look at Steve Jobs. You look at the way he's done his presentations. You look at some of the other people who have started to do the presentations, Elon Musk and all of that. The one thing you'll say about all of them is that it's just they're just oozing confidence, aren't they? You know,
Yeah,
the
definitely.
passion is purely, and very obviously there. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I think we also talk about this like prior to the session, which is about when you actually stand up on the stage and people feel your confidence.
Mm-hmm.
That makes a whole lot of difference.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, basically people will just believe in whatever you say, and yeah, the
Yeah.
confidence come first too, I
Mm-hmm.
think.
And that can be learned. It can be learned. Yeah.
Hmm, interesting. All right. So next, what are the most common misconceptions about presentation skills?
Okay. So we talked about some of them. So I just to remind myself, certainly having charisma is one of them. People think, oh, I'm not really a charismatic sort of person. Okay, that may be that's an assessment that you have to decide on your own. All right. But again, charisma you have or you don't have, it is a misconception because, again, you can be taught how to say things in a certain way, how to be more effective. There are circumstances in which being friendly isn't necessarily the way to go. So, where does charisma come into that particular situation, especially if you're delivering somber news?
Mm,
Um, so I think one of the biggest ones, certainly in Malaysia, about one big misconception about presentation skills is I think people tend to forget that there are lots of different ways in which you have to present. Um, you know, we tend to always think seminar, product sales, or delivering financial reports, or giving some kind of a speech that has to do with a company. It's certainly within the corporate setting, yes, presentation skills, sure, absolutely. But then there are other types. You've got presenting yourself for a job interview. That's a
mhm,
we talked about that. That's a presentation skill. That's one. What if you are pitching a proposal to a local council to build or not build um, a green lung? Sorry, not a green lung. A highway through a green lung. That's a presentation skill, isn't it? What
mhm,
about providing a defense in a trial? That's presentation skill as well, right?
definitely.
All right. Presenting yourself for a date. that's a thing as well. But what they all have at the end of it is two things. One, you are trying to provide as much information as possible to help somebody make a decision, right? And the decision can be a sale, right? If you're talking about an interview, you're selling yourself. If you're talking about a date, you're selling yourself as a proposition. I'm somebody that you should spend time with. In a defense, exactly the same thing. The sale pitch is my client is innocent and you should find them so, right? So don't get too hung up on this idea of, I have to be super friendly or whatever. You don't. Um, the other thing is that you can be bound by a topic. If you are presenting a scientific paper, there is no room for levity. There's no room to have fun with it. Not true. Absolutely not true. What do you want? Right? Do you want the information to get across effectively so that people leave with a better understanding? Or do you just want to do this because your boss said, look, you have to present this, and then just sort of get it done like a Q2, Q3 report? I've sat through those, and I have gone through where people just go, you know, data, 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 and at the end of it, thinking to myself, well, if you had printed that out, you would have saved a lot of time. Um, Especially because the audience already is expecting that to be there. Have you added any value to those data points? Is what's important. Um, yeah. Sorry. One final one. That a person needs to have exceptional language skills. No, not true.
Mm.
You need to have a reasonable level of language skill. You don't have to be amazing at it, because at the end of the day, the less words you use, the better.
Hmm. Yeah, very interesting.
Sorry, a
I
lot
think
to digest, right? Sorry.
quite a lot, but I'm one thing to add on. Like I suddenly have a thought about having charisma. Not sure
Mhm.
if it makes sense, but I have a thought about everyone wants to have the charisma. Everyone wants to stand up like a looking or feeling or being like a Steve Jobs or Elon Musk or whoever yeah, like
Mhm.
good presenter. But the point is like some people would have forgot that even Steve Jobs, even anyone would have someone that don't like this person. So
Absolutely.
yeah, my point is actually about sometimes we are trying to impress, trying to be like someone, or trying to make everyone like and love our presentation, like our
Mhm.
personality. But that's kind of impossible to do.
Absolutely. I can absolutely tell you that there is almost nothing you can do about somebody liking you or disliking you. There really isn't, because human beings, all being different, everybody has their own different touch points. Someone might just not like the color of your hair. I don't know. You absolutely can't do anything. You can't hedge for that, unfortunately. And it's not that important unless you are getting a lot of feedback saying that you are quite unlikable. You've got to get to the root of why that might be.
Mhm.
But again, once you've gone through the checklist of things that make for a good or effective presentation, then beyond that, yeah, it could be a personality thing. But again, you know, if you have somebody who you can talk to give you an honest assessment, that's a great starting point. Preferably a friend or a colleague, someone who you're quite close with, but someone who is also willing to be brutally honest with you about it. But again, at the same time, take everything that you're told with a pinch of salt. Okay, because at the end of the day, you are the one who's presenting yourself. You make that call, right?
Yeah, and I also think like it's easier said than done. We can like tell people, forget about the judgment. Be yourself. But at another flip side, people are now so obsessed with the likes. How many people follow
Sure.
us, how many followers we have, how many people are watching. For example, how many person is actually like watching our live now. It's
Hmm.
just so easy to get like carried away by this kind of thought about whether people like us, whether people listen, and this.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. We're all, well, human beings are emotional people, you know. Yeah.
Have you ever had this thought yourself?
Well, yeah, definitely. Especially with my line, you are open to a fair bit of commentary from people. So you have to learn to filter out the emotional responses from the what's the word I'm looking for, from the constructive criticism. There is a big difference,
Mm,
right? Some people, just mean, they don't like you, and they're very happy to tell you. But it's actually fine. That's okay. You can't be everything to everyone. The deal is whether or not you can tell a person why you don't like them and offer them some kind of insight as to why that might be the case. Then it's up to that person to decide whether that's a valid criticism or not. If you don't like me because I'm tall, for example. That is not a valid criticism. There is nothing I can do about that. All I can do is say, I'm sorry, can't change that. How can I help you with something else? You know,
Yep, I think that's very important. Have I mean, whether that's a constructive feedback or it's just a mean criticism, is
absolutely.
we have to tell the difference. Right.
Sure.
Yeah. Another misconception that suddenly come to my mind is, could it be like if I just have a fantastic presentation slides,
Hmm.
and that will make me a very good presenter, or that will give a very good presentation?
It could. It could. It depends how amazing they are. At the end of the day, you can have an amazing presentation deck, but then you may be incidental as the presenter, so it sort of doesn't matter that you were there. You are basically the person who just progresses the slides along, right? So you're right, could happen. I personally try not to rely on too many slides, and if I do, they don't have a lot of words on them, but they are very flashy, because you certainly want to get people's attention. But you want to, you know, articles are written with very bold headlines for a really good reason because you really want to get people's attention. The difference, of course, with the presentation is that if you do a headline, you want to try to pack in as much information as you can within the headline. So then it becomes a snapshot, a soundbite, or, you want your information to be easily absorbed, right?
Mm.
You want people to be able to assimilate that information quickly because, after all, a seminar or a presentation could go anywhere from an hour to 2 hours, sometimes, longer. And fatigue does set in. It's not like people are walking around and, absorbing information as and when. They're sitting down, you have a captive audience, but you don't have a captive audience. Do you know what I mean? Just because they're sitting there doesn't mean they're listening to you. All right.
Yes,
They
they
can
are there,
zone.
but they might not be there.
Absolutely. And especially with phones, people are like double screening, so to speak.
Mhm,
Um, yeah, you use a deck, get your
mhm.
points across, but you really should be the focus of it because you are the one who's adding value to the presentation, right?
Yes,
Have the points there, you fill in the blanks, so to speak.
yes.
Yeah, then you become an important part of the organization. Even if you are just working for yourself, you become the component. Because, like I said, if the deck was truly, truly amazing, then you're better off just emailing it to people and let them read it. You know.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, the point is really about you delivering the value.
Hmm.
If you can't replace a presentation deck that is just sitting there flashing like slide by slide, with
Yeah,
people might not need that presenter,
sure,
right?
absolutely right.
Yeah, we just have an audience saying like, Mr. Anon, you just delivered a great presentation already.
Thank you.
Definitely. Or else why would I invite Non to be on the show today? There is a
Well,
reason.
thanks very much.
But thanks for that. All right. So we've been talking about presentation skill a lot, but why? But like, does having a good presentation skill really increase our income? Do you think so?
Yes, I would definitely say so because it offers you opportunities to do things. So if you imagine an organization where we are already apt to thinking that organizations are groups of people working in silos, right?
Mhm.
They're sort of isolated from everybody else. You're a cog in the wheel. I know I keep using these analogies. Um, you can be voiceless in an organization and still be effective. But if you want to progress, if you want to stand out, you do need to be the kind of person who is able to express ideas. Now, there is a big difference between you taking the initiative to present ideas, and then you've got the flip side of that situation when you are asked to present ideas. Now, more often than not, when it comes to presentation skills, you might be one of those people who is asked on a fairly regular basis to provide solutions, to provide proposals. How many times have you been asked by your immediate superior, can you put together a presentation because we are pitching to a new client? That's a very specific situation. Now, imagine that the revenue of the company is dependent entirely on you in business development, right? But you can't find a way to articulate why your product is so great, why your company is so great, why the rates you offer are better than everybody else's. If you can't do that, then that's going to have a negative effect on your ability to progress in the company. If you're working on your own, um, I would say customer service is vitally important. And I think another misconception about presentation skills has a lot to do with the fact that it isn't always face to face. You know, these days, there are lots of reviews that people have to write. And as a business owner, you have to respond to them. How you present yourself as the face of that company matters tremendously, especially because lots of businesses these days live and die on ratings and reviews. You know,
Mhm.
we haven't gotten to that point in Malaysia just yet, but certainly in America, with companies like Yahoo who still do their ratings, and Amazon and Yelp, for example, um, the reviews that you are given, yeah, have a lot to do with the product, but how you respond to them. I would suggest to you that if you can respond to your clients in a way that makes them feel good about you and your company, that's going to have a really dramatic effect on your bottom line, right? Um, at a very basic level, we're talking about interviews before. The presentation skills are vitally important because that makes the difference between you at least getting your foot in the door and having the conversation. Your CV, as brilliant as it may be, will get you to the interview room. The 5, 10, 15 minutes that you spend with the person interviewing you is going to decide whether or not you have a job, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the point about like having good presentation still in an interview itself, yes, it is very important. But you just brought up a point where a lot of people actually neglected, which is presentation skill does not have to be in a face to face way. Like yeah, like customer surveys, whether you can respond to email, to comments, to like yeah, Instagram comment or Facebook comment. It's very
Yeah,
very important.
absolutely.
Right, and then like definitely when it comes to increasing your income, business development, it's in many forms, and like each and every like business owner would want to hire someone who can really grow their business, and like
Yeah,
that is
absolutely.
very.
I'm not a big fan of quoting, you know, industry giants and all that. But suddenly, when I was asked to help with this particular one with you, I looked up something that Warren Buffett actually said. And to cut a long story short, he basically said if you want to increase your value by 50%, go and take a presentation skills course.
Oh.
Yeah, because that's the thing that's going to get you out there noticed. The worker who is really good at their job, right, is the person who has a secure, um, will have secure employment. They will, they'll move along. They'll get their 5% or 2.5, whatever, every year. But it's the person who stands out and is able to market themselves. Let's not forget that presentation skills is all about really marketing, whatever that may be, yourself, your idea, your proposal, your defense, your plea. It's a marketing exercise. And marketing is about messaging, and messaging is about information, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. So get that done, learn, it doesn't have to be with me, go and do the work on your own. There's lots and lots, as far as resources go online. I'll share a little tip with you a little bit later on how you can do something effectively right now. Yeah.
Hmm, interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I really like, especially coming from Warren Buffett. I might have seen that, but probably forgot about that. I think that is so. I think it's so useful. I think like whatever we do doesn't matter. We are selling things. We think we are selling things, or we are not. Even if we are just a worker, just a desk bound job, a presentation skill is very important.
Hmm.
Right. Okay. So like by any chance you have any of your favorite stories about someone who actually succeeded by improving their presentation skills?
Well, it's not a it's going to sound disingenuous, but I would use myself as an example, because the person that you see before you now wasn't always like this. Growing up, I was painfully shy. As a kid, I suffered from tremendous low self-esteem. Um, And that has a lot to do with the fact that we moved around a lot as a family. So I wasn't able to cement a lot of friendships. And I was always sort of the outsider because, one, I've got the unusual name. I wasn't actually, I am Malaysian, but I wasn't born here. I was born in Hong Kong. Um, and then we moved over here when I was very little, maybe 5 or 6 years old. And then I went to school in Malaysia, then subsequently went to school in Singapore. So you put all of those things together and it makes for a very lonely childhood, right? Um, and then what happened was one fine day, uh, after having lost a job, I was unemployed for a long period of time. And then Hits FM did an open audition and they asked for a recording, which I didn't do because I didn't hear about it until very, very late, very close to the closing date, actually. And I thought, oh gosh, what am I going to do? So I wrote them a letter instead. And it's one of the things I can do. Now, I know you may think, what does that have to do with, presentation skills? Well, it kind of actually does because I decided, look, I've got nothing to lose, but I can write and I don't have to talk, right? So I wrote what I thought was a funny letter. And wouldn't you know it, in a couple of days, I got a response and they said, come to the audition. And then I went and I didn't get the job, as you probably realize. Serena C got it. So she and I started
Oh.
on the very same day. It was,
Does
yeah.
she know about it?
Oh yeah, she does. She does. We went and we started on the same day. It was on the 31st of December, 1999.
Oh wow.
Yep. So she went on air at midnight. I went on air for Mix at midnight. And after the first talk set that we did, we both came out of the studio and go, how did it go? How did it go? And she was like, yeah, I think I did pretty well. And I was like, I spoke so fast. I don't think anybody understood a single thing I said. And sure enough, my program manager at the time goes, what did you do? It's like, I couldn't understand a single thing you said. And he goes, love the enthusiasm, love the excitement, slow it down. No one's going to understand, even with all that energy. So it took me, well, I don't know, a couple of years before I finally got to the point where I could do, or be comfortable being on air. But it took a long time to learn the ins and outs of doing it and a lot of training. Um, I don't think people realize that when you get on radio, it's not, you don't just go on and then, there's a lot of training that's involved. I mean, Catherine, you know this. You're managing everything behind the scenes now. You're producing this show, right? Lots of buttons and things to press.
Yes.
Same thing with radio. Big studio, loads of buttons, loads of computer screens, and yet you have to find a way to be able to communicate. I think that's one thing that radio people do quite well. It kind of sounds like they're talking to you directly. It's like it seems like it's a one-on-one conversation, even though we're talking to millions of people at the same time.
Mhm.
And that's what separates the really good announcers from the okay announcers. I haven't really heard a bad announcer, to be honest, but I know how much training goes into it. Um, so kind of a follow-up story. So I know someone who started out as a roadrunner. Do you remember the roadrunners? They're sort of the ground activation crew for the radio stations. So Mix FM, we had them.
Mhm.
And so we had one of them who would come into studio and would sit in with all the announcers whenever he could, just to listen. And eventually he ended up having his own show. He ended up doing sports, and then he ended up doing his own podcast as well. He's still on air at the moment. I won't say who it is, but this is somebody who had no training as such. He just plonked himself and watched and tried to emulate what the announcers were doing. Yeah, so he learned.
Interesting. That's a nice
Mhm.
story. And you mentioned sports, and which is the one that you told me earlier that it's one of the tough ones. And
Yeah,
he,
sport.
from
Yeah.
someone who did not really go through the proper training, and he
Yep.
actually succeeded.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's a meaningful story because,
Mhm.
like I mentioned, a lot of misconceptions about presentation skill is yes, you need to maybe go for courses and all those things. And those are good, but sometimes everyone can do it as long as you have the passion. Can I say that?
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. And just as importantly is to find out. You have to find where your sweet spot is, I beg your pardon. And the sweet spot is basically that very nice place where your your knowledge of the subject balances out with your passion for the subject. If I asked you to do a presentation now on, oh, I don't know, budget 2021, 22, sorry, you'd have to go and do a lot of research. But if I asked you to talk about, video production now, which one do you think you'd be able to do?
Video production, and the other one is?
About the budget for 2022.
Oh, right. Hmm. Yeah, I guess it's naturally we will go for those that we had a little bit of experience and also a little bit of a topic that, yeah, we are very, very comfortable to talk about. That
Absolutely.
I guess a combination of a bit of knowledge and
Hmm.
a bit of you like about the product, like about
Hmm.
the thing that you're talking about, and that gets us to a flow, I guess.
Hmm. Absolutely. I mean, if it becomes a part of who you are, then you're just telling a story.
Hmm. All right. So, yep. Now that we know that the presentation skill does increase our income, we heard of success stories of people who actually succeeded, and but how can we actually improve our presentation skills?
So you would need to look at what I consider to be the fundamentals. First and foremost is the presentation itself. And there is a checklist of things that you need to absolutely make sure that you are looking at. One is certainly the topic. All right. Arm yourself with as much information as you can. You don't necessarily have to memorize it. Now, I'm talking about presentations for things that you are unfamiliar with. Let's say the situation is that you have been suddenly asked by your boss or immediate superior to give a presentation to potential clients. I don't know. Okay. Or, okay, give you another example. They've suddenly decided that they are going to be doing another presentation somewhere else. You need to review Q3 finances and reports with a bunch of analysts. Yeah, that's a good one. Okay. All right. And you've never done it before. You've never done it before, but you have a pretty good idea of the numbers because you are in the company, right? You churn those things out. Your boss wouldn't trust you if they didn't think you could do it, right? So what you need to do is one, need to look at the presentation in itself. Is it data heavy? If it is data heavy, you need to pick the highlights. You need to pick the things that you are absolutely sure that your audience needs to hear, right?
Mm,
That's going to take some research, but that's what a good presentation is. You have to do your research, look at it, filter it, decide which are the most important points, highlight those yourself for yourself first and foremost. Secondly, you need to look at the context of the presentation itself. What is the point of the presentation? Are you just providing data? Will you be fielding questions? Are you expecting questions? Is it meant to be interactive, right? Or are you literally going to stand there and just read out numbers? Okay. At the same time, the context matters. Are the numbers good? Are the numbers bad in this particular case? Right. So, what is the tone that you have to take when presenting, these sorts of things? Especially because if you're dealing with a company whose reputation is kind of built on, your P&L, for
mhm,
example,
mhm,
um, what sort of tone do you want to set? Bearing in mind that share prices, they fluctuate wildly depending on how the market perceives you,
mm,
right? So, if you're going to go out there and you end up being a little bit nervous and you're presenting numbers that are fantastic, what's possibly going to happen is that the analysts are going to look at you and go, that person doesn't seem to be telling me everything. Why are they so nervous? And, it happens. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it does sometimes. And you need to really understand who your audience is. If in this particular case, it's a bunch of analysts, they are very much going to be focused on the data. They are also going to have typically a bunch of questions that are going to be related to the information that you are providing. So the best way to prepare yourself is to prepare yourself, right? Be prepared, right? Field as many questions internally as you possibly can. Ask people who have had experience doing it, get their input. That's, the best thing that you can do. Um, for a more traditional presentation, I would really recommend, if you know what the venue is going to be beforehand, if it's a live presentation in front of an audience, not video, go and check out the venue, right?
Mm.
Do an equipment test. Do all of the things that you should not be stressing out about on the day of the presentation. Have you ever been to a presentation and the projector doesn't work because you didn't test it? Have you been to a presentation where your mic suddenly cuts out, right? Have a contingency in place. Again, be prepared. That's the best advice that I can give you. Understand your audience. Is it a big forum? Is it a small forum? Is there going to be opportunity for you to be a bit more personal? Will you be able to talk to people directly? Do you know what I mean? Like, I've had to do press conferences where what I like to do is I'd like to find out beforehand who are the media people who are going to be attending. I like to know their names, so much so that when they do ask questions, I can refer to them directly. And that matters because, well, they're going to be reporting what you're saying. And, going back to what you were saying, Catherine, whether somebody likes you or dislikes you, it can actually kind of make a bit of a difference, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you have shown that you've made the effort to connect with your audience, building that rapport makes a very, very big difference to whether or not they are going to first take the message on board, secondly, accept the message, right? After all, that's your primary thing, isn't it? Getting the message across.
Yep.
Hmm.
That's very important. Yeah. I think I pick
Hmm.
up the let me do a summary. In case like some of our audience are missed out. Let me correct me if I'm wrong. Tip number one, pick the highlights, because it can be like your presentations might take a long time, knowing the highlights and emphasize on it is very, very important.
Hmm.
And secondly, use the right tone.
Hmm.
We don't want to use go to a very serious presentation and yeah, and started making it look less serious and people don't
Yeah.
take you seriously. That can be
Correct.
a problem.
Yeah.
And tip number three, know the venue.
Hmm.
I think on top of that is really to do the testing, know how many people you're presenting to, understand where exactly you'll be standing, or no, check the mic, check the computer and everything that you'll be using. It's very, very
Absolutely.
important. And then tip number four is understand your audience, right? Because the whole objective of a presentation is to get the message out. If you
Yeah.
understand more about your audience, makes it easier for you to get to the point
Yeah.
and relate to them, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yep.
So, as far as filling in the need of that audience, sorry, I just wanted to, just a small little thing at the end. The What's important about understanding your audience is that if you put yourself in the position where you are trying to figure out what their need is, your job is to fulfill that need. For some people, it's information. For some people, it might be confidence in you, confidence in the company. Um, they might need to be sold on an idea, and
Mhm.
conversely they might be looking to be not talked out of a situation. So what I mean by that is very much in a sales situation, for example, you've got a bunch of people who are possibly excited to hear about your product, right? And they just need to be sold on the benefits, so on and so forth. They may be existing customers and you might be, sending them something entirely new. On the other hand, you may have a bunch of people who are incredibly skeptical, right? Now,
Mhm.
that's what I mean by a group of people who are trying not to be talked out of something.
Mhm.
That's a slightly different forum, and the approach and the strategy for that is something that's entirely different. But today it's good. That's a very specialized area that I don't really want to get into because that's an entirely different program altogether. But what I'm trying to say is you just need to be aware that there are going to be people at very different levels, right?
Mhm.
Do not assume that your audience is all at one level.
Mhm.
Think about which is the biggest group and then tailor your message for the majority of the people who are there.
Yep. Now I'm more interested to know about the the way to handle like people who are so ready to say no or so not open to everything that you're about to say, and how do we get the message out to them? I think that is very, very interesting. But no worries. Whoever are interested, feel free to contact Non later on.
Okay. Yeah,
I'm
sure.
sure he will be open to share about those things. Yep.
Absolutely.
And I think a lot of our audience here might be working in a financial services industry, whether it's financial planning or
Mhm.
yeah, or actually have interest in personal finance, whether it's their own or yeah, to yeah. And so how do we actually improve in presenting financial related information or content, which
Okay.
can to be boring at sometimes.
Well, yeah, that's a question of again the audience and whether they have a vested interest in it.
Mm,
Again, what is the messaging? Are you actually trying to sell a service? Are you trying to sell a product? Is it a sales pitch? If it's a sales pitch, then you want to try to make it as interesting as possible. I'm sure that for people who have done sales for quite some time, you would have heard this many, many times before. Find the need and then find a way to service that need, right? Which is
mm,
way easier said than done. From a presentation skills perspective, the things that you can do to help yourself. Number one is again, don't be too obsessed with the the data, the
mm,
numbers. All right. If you are going to have to, if you have absolutely no choice, tailor it in such a way that you are talking to the benefit of that audience member, for example. Okay, if you're talking about personal finances, you can say, you can ask them questions about why, if this is what you want, why haven't you achieved it? Perhaps I can provide you with the solution. Okay. You want people to trust you. And the way that people trust you is knowing that you know what you're talking about. All right. So go back to the first fundamental, which is arm yourself with all the knowledge that you can. Right. Don't be too caught up with trying to memorize numbers and things like that, because what will happen is that you can actually stand up there and look like you're reciting facts and figures, which people will just glaze over. That's typically what happens. Highlights, again, I keep going back to that.
yes.
It's the
Yes.
highlights. It's what can I do for you? This is how I'm going to do it. This is how you can be part of the process. Involve your audience, right? And try to imagine that you're talking to one person and one person at a time. When
Mm,
you're on stage, some people like the podium, some people like the safety of having a barrier between the audience and themselves, and some people are very happy walking up and down. I personally like doing the walking up and down, also because I like using teleprompters, and that's a very effective tool, right? So a teleprompter is basically a screen that is sometimes on stage, sometimes it's off at the back behind the audience, but you can see what's happening. You can read everything that's there. There's nothing wrong with carrying notes, right? Some people like carrying a tablet, or some people like carrying a phone. But do remember that in this day and age, we are very used to watching other people who are on a phone. And as soon as we see them on a phone, something happens in our brains and we think they are not engaged with us. The same thing happens when you're on stage. All right.
mm,
If you look at your phone or tablet too often, people are just going to go, okay, you know? So try to avoid that if you can. Pick out people in the audience, left, middle, right, alternate, you know, where you're
mm,
looking and talking to the audience, because that makes people feel involved. And you are trying to involve them. Notwithstanding, you may not be able to see their faces directly, but do make the effort to speak to every section of your audience. Okay? Um, Try to be calm, right? But it's okay
definitely.
to be animated as well. If
Yeah.
yeah,
I
if
was just about to ask is because I think I don't remember when, I don't remember from who and from where. I remember someone commented about me presenting and
mhm.
having too much of hand movement and moving about too much, or yeah. um,
It's actually okay, but I would recommend that if it's videoed, that you rewatch, and then be honest with yourself about what you liked about your presentation and what you thought could be better, and then ask for other people's opinions. A lot of people are afraid to ask for feedback because they sometimes they don't want to hear what they're told, but that's ironic because you're already on stage in front of a whole bunch of people. Feedback is entirely what you want. you
mhm,
know you can feel that when you're on stage sometimes, whether you have disengaged an audience or whether or not they're really there with you. I wouldn't worry too much about the hand gestures and being animated. You just want to manage that level, because if that's who you are, then that's who you are, you know uh, but it can sort of be, it can be taught. Yeah.
yeah.
Don't worry too much about it, Catherine.
Uh, Having said about like if we actually notice someone, a few people like in the audience started being on their phone, checking their phone. What do we
Yeah.
do?
Okay. Well, if it's a few people, I wouldn't worry about it. It's just the way that it is. Sometimes people are very busy. I mean, the whole point of having a phone is so that you're contactable all the time. I mean, as far as we know, it could be an emergency situation. At least that's the position that I always take, right? Um, and besides, it's really up to the presenter. If you are engaging enough, you should be okay. But it does happen, and don't take it personally. People are like that. It just happens to be that way. Yeah.
I wonder if it's a stupid question or like, is there a certain trick that we can do that actually can immediately bring the attention back to us? Doesn't matter if it is talking
You
to each
could,
other or.
you could. I mean, it could be a little bit perilous. It really depends on what your personal confidence level is.
Mhm,
You could involve those people by, engaging them at that point. So you could highlight specific people there. Personally, I wouldn't, because you never know how people were going to react. Some people react very badly to those sorts of things.
mm,
Um, no, honestly, just trust in your presentation. Just trust that you have put in the work. And well, practice, keep practicing. You may have the luxury, and if you do have the luxury of time to do it, practice in front of your colleagues, practice in front of people that you trust to give you honest feedback. All right.
mhm,
Certainly, you need to practice your presentations at least a couple of times before you take to stage. I don't know many people who will do a presentation and then just next day get up there and do it. I don't know many people who will, but practice standing in front of a mirror. It's very important to do that, uh, because as human beings, we tend to be a little bit unaware.
mhm,
Certainly, working in television, I am very aware of stuff because we get told constantly over the earpiece by
mhm.
the producer. You're not sitting straight. You're not, your head's not straight, and that there's a lot of awareness that goes into the thing, and you do have to watch your tone,
Mm,
especially if you're dealing with a lot of material. There could be a tendency of droning a little bit because you have to get through a lot of stuff.
mhm,
But that's why, again, I keep saying it over again, do the highlights, right? Highlight stuff to yourself. And most importantly, have a conversation. It's a
mhm,
conversation. It is not, you are not delivering a lecture ever, as far as I'm concerned. Even if you are actually delivering a lecture, you're not delivering a lecture. You are trying to pass information on to a group of people and make sure that they get the information. And your job is to make it as easily understood and as interesting as possible, right?
yeah.
I mean, I really wish I could go back and, we talked about this before. I had a physics teacher, amazing physics teacher, the most knowledgeable person in the world, could not understand a word she was saying because it was just so technical. And the thing is, she had forgotten about her audience because
Correct.
she was presenting to a group of people who didn't understand, who was hearing stuff for the very first time, and she forgot that. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
she knew all of this stuff, and she expected us to know it too. Yeah,
Hmm.
but she
Yeah. I
forgot we
think
were students.
And all these things that you're talking about, keep going back to like the four tips that you were talking about. Understand your audience, and like pick the highlights, and those are the things that we forget so easily. And
Mhm.
also, like, it's so easy that when we try to present, because of the word like presentation and having the deck, what we do is just read out, or just get the data out, and we forgot to actually have the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely right.
Right. Right.
Absolutely right.
Yep. We also have a question from an audience. So,
Mhm.
is it a good thing to actually switch between different languages in throughout a presentation?
Okay, so that's a question about your audience themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you can. I think for the most part, if you're going to do English, Mandarin, Bahasa, Cantonese, Hokkien, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Mm-hmm.
you would need to do a very quick survey of what your audience is like.
True.
If personally, if I was going to do it, I would ask. At this, I'd say, hey, do you mind if I, do this and the other? And then some people go, no, or whatever. You can sort of tailor yourself that way. Now,
Mm-hmm.
okay, let me qualify that first of all. Most of the presentations that I do to a group of people,
Mm-hmm.
I will actually do that because my Malay is awful. My Mandarin is non-existent. Cantonese, not fantastic, but I'll make a joke out of it, right? And then I will ask for the consensus of the audience, and then I'll explain to them what my limitations are, right? And then they'll
Mm-hmm.
go, okay, never mind, we'll give you a pass. Just do it in English. So then we've created sort of a relationship.
Yep.
If you do have an audience that wants you to do it in both languages, then make it very clear at the start. Okay, I
Mm-hmm.
will do this bit in English, and then I will do this bit in Bahasa. But please bear with me because it's going to take twice the amount of time to do.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the only person in the world that I know that can do that is, former Singapore Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew. So
Uh-huh.
he used to do his National Day speech in three languages because he could, right? English, Mandarin, and Malay, right? It's pretty amazing to watch. But he would do them at different times. Okay. So,
Mm-hmm.
bear in mind you're going to take up a lot of time. But if you
Yep.
can, hey, why not? If you can make a joke, most people can understand Bahasa. So I think you'd be okay.
Yeah. I think like as long as it fits the purpose of the presentation, and
Sure.
yeah, we don't want to get in a situation where it's a very serious presentation and then you started mixing languages. That might be inappropriate, but other
Yeah.
times I think it can be a very good thing to do to capture attention, right?
Yeah, but like I said, it's gonna take a lot of your time to do it. My advice would be, knowing that you're going to get into that situation, perhaps you want to do your slides, in the second language, for example. So do the presentation in English, right? But then have your
Mm-hmm.
slides in Bahasa. So at least, you're able to explain what's happening on screen. And for the people who are perhaps not understanding you in English, they can at least read what's on the screen. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So you've saved yourself a little bit of stress that way.
Yep, that's true. That's true. All right. So yeah, we've been talking about improving presentation skill, and so we also know that you're having this presentation skill module that is available. Like whoever is interested can reach out to you
Hmm.
directly.
Hmm.
And so, could you share a bit about how is your module different from the others? Because I mean, the reason I'm really asking is because nowadays it can be like courses, online courses can be available online,
Hmm.
everywhere. We have masterclass, we have yeah, other kind of online courses. So
Sure. Okay. So I guess what makes, oh, well, I haven't seen a whole lot of others. I have attended a few before. Uh, but I guess what makes mine a little bit different is that my starting position might be different from other people's, because very quickly, if I go back to what my background is, I was in radio, I was in television, I've done live events, I've done corporate events, I've moderated panels, I've done sports, as we mentioned before, and I've done the news. Sorry, I mentioned that already. The thing about all of them is that they require you to wear different hats. They are completely different presentation styles entirely. So I've written the module in a way that tries to cover as much ground as possible for people with very different requirements, right? So it's not a one set fits all. It's actually designed in such a way that if you tell me what your specific need is, I will reorganize it so that I can, have a much better idea of what you want, and then design it in such a way that it is most applicable to you. As an example, the difference between the radio presentation and the television presentation is one, the need to be seen. So the television one requires you to wear the hat that is look straight at the camera, be very aware of your facial expressions, make sure that your tone matches the way you look, right? You can't be delivering somber news smiling. It doesn't work. It just doesn't work. You can't be talking about people who died in a tragedy smiling, right? In radio, it's a completely different thing because it's a theater of mind, it's a theater of imagination. People will imagine what you look like. For some reason, funny story, when I first started getting on air, I had a couple of people call me and they told me they imagined me as a 40-year-old Indian man. I don't know why, but apparently that's how I sound. Yeah. Um, Stage presentation is also different, right?
Mhm,
Like, as you say, it's where people notice you. It's people notice how you walk. It's how the hand gestures, whether you're animated, not animated. You also have the benefit of being able to point to, you know, giant screen or, managing the slides. It gives you a lot more opportunity to connect with your audience because you are actually face to face. And I think a lot of people forget that when you're doing a live presentation, the feedback is instantaneous. And
mhm,
whether we are realizing it or not, we are adjusting how we're speaking and how we are moving based on what we think is happening with the audience, right?
mhm,
As you say, if you are doing a presentation and you see people kind of zoning out, there is something you actually have to do, right? Do you
mhm,
raise your voice? Do you, decide at that point, let's take a break? Do you crack a joke? Do you pull up a big flashy slide, that you've got standing by? So that's a benefit because you can adjust.
yep,
If you are doing a phone call, a web conference call, you don't have interaction with people. The big danger with that is you don't modulate because you're getting no feedback whatsoever. You're just literally reading from a script, right? So don't do that. Okay. Always have in mind that you are having a conversation. If I had to leave today with anything at all, with one message, it would be have a conversation. So in that sense, that's what makes my module different. I will adjust it for you rather than say, this is what it is, go and learn it. I mean, of course, I'll walk you through the thing, but I'm not going to tell you there's one way to do it. You tell me about your audience, you tell me about your circumstances. We'll find a way to make it work for you.
mhm. Yep.
Yeah.
I think that is actually that from that already sounds way better than those that we watch recorded videos of teaching us how to do a better presentation skill. I think those can be good, like those can be an extra thing, but more importantly is actually have a way that actually fits our requirement because everyone needs the presentation skill, but depends on what situation, whether
Yeah.
it's like you mentioned face to face or it's just about present the best version of yourself in front of a
Hmm.
date or anything. It can
Oh,
be
yeah.
anything. Yeah.
Yeah, no, honestly, I mean, look, if you if your next presentation is that you need to go on a date and you want to impress somebody, hey, well, let's have a chat. I might be able to help. I don't know,
It's
but that
interesting.
I could help with some things. I may have to design a module for that. Okay.
I guess that is a useful like life skill for people nowadays.
Oh yeah.
And then I think in some point you can even collaborate with dating sites. A lot of dating
Yeah,
sites
that's a
that
good
might be
idea.
able to help a lot of people. They have the site there available, but they are not getting the dates out.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So whoever is interested, they can actually reach out to you via this email address, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
So, yep. So the website is starttalkingheads at gmail.com.
Yeah.
All right. Yep. And so, yeah, you kind of actually brought that up already. But if there's one big audacious habit or goal that you want our audience to just take action now, what would that be?
Have a conversation. Absolutely have a conversation. And briefly, by that, what I mean is your best presentations are always going to be the ones where you are fully invested. Today, after the end of this, think about the most enjoyable conversation you've ever had with someone. All right, one person. All right, I don't mean a seminar or anything. I just one conversation that you've had that you really really enjoyed. Try to remember what it is that you enjoyed about it. All right, my guess is going to be that it was a topic that you really are invested in. Right, so something that you really enjoyed. It could be a sport, it could be a food, it could be a picture that you saw, it could be a book that you read. Right, I want you to think about how comfortable you were having that conversation and why you were excited about it. Right, because when you're able to have a conversation, it really doesn't matter how big the group eventually becomes, because at the end of the day, your words are going to resonate with the audience, because they are going to be able to pick up on your passion. They're going to be able to pick up on how much you love your subject. And really, when it comes down to things like sales, and we talked about going on a date being kind of a sale, you're selling yourself. That's what connects people. You've built a relationship, right? If you're going to be a drone, if you're just going to be a person who delivers information, you can do that. You will definitely get the information across to a certain number of people. But learning presentation skills is about getting the most effective messaging possible, which means trying to hit as many people as you possibly can. And the best way to do that is be prepared, practice like crazy, and remember that the people that you're talking to are people. They have needs, they have wants, they have ups and downs, they have moments of boredom as well, right? Can I just give you like a really really simple example from my past?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so before getting into broadcasting, I was in advertising. All right.
Hmm.
And there's kind of a joke within advertising because you've got so many different departments. You've got the servicing department, which are the people who go out and effectively it's client servicing. The client tells you what they want. You come back to the office. They've given you a brief, right? Now, as the client servicing person, your job is to translate that brief into meaningful information to pass on to the art director and the copywriter, right? So your job is to translate what the client wants in a meaningful way that effectively the art department, the creative department can work with. So the kind of joke, and maybe not everybody in advertising agrees with me, but certainly with where I was working was, you have to rewrite the brief, I beg your pardon,
Hmm.
in a way that the creative department understands. And sometimes that means writing it like you're talking to a 5-year-old kid, because the information that the client gives you will include things like what the objective is, what they absolutely expect to see, what options you may have. But bearing in mind, they're not the creative department. They have an idea, right? Your job as the creative agency is to come up with a fabulous idea for the
Hmm.
product, right? Part of the information that they give you is the objectives. Sometimes it could be like really nitty gritty stuff like we expect to hit sales revenue. The point of this campaign is to hit this much in terms of revenue. That is information that the creative department actually doesn't really need. So your job as the servicing department is to filter out. The writing the thing like a 5-year-old is because you want to be absolutely sure that you get information across very clearly. You can tell them this is the product, these are the dimensions of the product, These are your mandatories, meaning this is the client absolutely insists that these things must be there. And then you've got your optional this, that, and the other. Then you leave it to the creative department. Now, imagine that if you went there and you had to take all of the information from the client, pass it straight to the creative department, what has happened? The creative department is going to go, okay, I'll just go and do everything, right? Because there's no filtering.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with doing a presentation, right? You've got this big chunk of information. What is the information? What is the core? What is compulsory information that you need to pass to the client, to your audience, right? Ever looked at a P&L and had to decipher what the highlights were, right? Okay. Do you go line by line with a P&L? No, you do not. You pick out your highlights and go, okay, this is what our last Q looked like. This is where we top lined. This is where we were losing. This is where we are. You don't sit down with them and go, item 1, item 2, item 3, item 4, because then they can read it themselves. What's your job?
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Exactly.
So there you go. Sorry, a bit chonghei, but yeah, I
No
kind of
problem.
got there.
Yeah, I mean, like basically, like well, you're talking about the kind of like the 4 tips that you mentioned earlier, which is
Hmm.
so important. But what you did actually is just to give real example of how do people actually miss out the highlights. Forgot to actually pick the highlights and then just present and focus on the most important point, which is a
Hmm.
big mistake that all of us make so easily,
Yeah.
right? Especially for, I mean, um for a person that rarely has to do a presentation, like they might not make that mistake because they are fairly new. They put more
Hmm.
effort into this, but this might happen more for people who are actually have to present very often. For example, maybe like a licensed financial planner like us, because we do present financial report quite a lot. So
Hmm.
if we don't we forget about actually highlighting the main points, forget that our job is to actually deliver the value, to bring out the important points for client to understand, we might fall into the mistake of, yeah, just read the reports. For example,
Absolutely.
your debt service ratio is 85% and your saving ratio is 10% now, and you have to increase your saving ratio to 50%. That, I think, after 10 minutes my client might just, okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's possible. Yeah, it is possible. Yeah.
Right.
Of course,
Okay.
that doesn't mean that you don't draw cartoons, like, just to make it more interesting.
Oh, well, I mean, I wish I can do that, you
Actually,
know.
come to think of it, maybe. What if somebody did an anime? That would be
Right.
interesting. Yeah, you never know,
Right.
right?
In fact,
Yeah.
there are people who are actually trying to, basically try to make personal finance as back then used to be a serious and boring topic into something that is very interesting, I think that really helps.
Well, like we talked about before, isn't there an opportunity, therefore, for somebody to do that and writing it for a much, much younger audience,
Hmm.
right? You'd have to find a way to tweak the language, you know,
Right.
for a
Right.
group of people who are constantly checking their TikToks.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Right. Exactly. Well, I mean, that gives me like so many things to think about. There's so many things that all these useful tips that can
Excellent.
be really put in practice. All right. So, thank you for all the things that you share with us. Thanks for the useful tips, and definitely thank you for agreeing to come on the show today to have this conversation with me. I definitely benefit a lot. I think same goes to my audience as well. Thank you for that.
No, it's entirely my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. It was really good fun. I really enjoy having our conversations. And I do hope that, the little bit that I shared was helpful. And, even if you just want to have a chat, any one of your viewers, just drop me a line. I'd be happy to find out a little bit more. Look, absolutely no obligation. I just love talking to people. So, yeah.
That's good. So whoever wants to learn and find out more or improve their presentation skill or actually find a good date or
Yeah, no
feel free to
promises
reach
there.
out.
I'll do my best.
I'm pretty sure from your experience, from the tips that you share, you might point out things that people did not realize.
Hope so. I might learn something too.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much. So, yep. But hopefully, I can see you in another session where we can talk about something else. And, yep.
Love to.
All right. Thank you. So thanks everyone for watching. Thanks for staying with us for the entire time. I definitely learned a lot from Non himself, especially from his experience, from different career, different path. I think everyone can actually learn from him, and there are so many things that we forgot about. The common mistakes or the common misconceptions that we know about presentation skill. Those can be really a good reminder for all of us to improve ourselves. So thank you, and I'll see you in another episode. For the other show notes and link, you can find on our website, mypf.my/podcast. And I'll see you in another episode. Hasta pronto.